Hi everybody, this is going to be part 2 of my cutting series video on cutting through. Specifically, this is part 2 to the part about cutting through. Subsequent videos will cover other aspects of cutting mechanics and how to train them. So this video being part 2 is meant to make sense after watching the first video on cutting through. So if you haven't watched that, I would suggest you stop here, go watch that, and then continue watching this video here so that you get the appropriate context for this. So basically I want to continue with the aspect of talking about how the cutting through fits into training overall and how it fits into the sort of pedagogical scheme and the way you fence. So first and foremost, in case I didn't make this clear enough in the last video, this sort of full shoulder cut action, that's not a normal action in fencing. I'm not suggesting for a moment that it is. It is instead a tool as part of our process for developing proper mechanics. It's a methodology used in some period sources as well as in this modern approach that I take to developing the skill and technique that we're looking for. And of course, also there are a variety of different kinds of cutting actions that show up in our sources, which, you know, more or less are relevant to the idea of cutting through. I'm not suggesting that this is the only way to cut. This is simply like, if you're in a situation where you're trying to achieve X, right, cutting through the target, then you need to do A, B, and C. A is one video, and B is another video, and C is another video, and so on. Okay? So, the other piece of thinking about how this cutting through motion that I described in my last video that we're going over here fits into a training methodology is part of a motor learning approach where you start with part task and then move to whole task learning. And this should seem very familiar to you once you start thinking about how you, for instance, treat footwork and coupling footwork with actions of the sort. You start off doing footwork with nothing in your hands, not thinking about the sword actions. You do that as an isolated movement, and then you build your way up to doing footwork with sword actions in combination with the way you actually would in fencing. This is the same basic teaching principle here, where we're going to start with doing just this big action here that only a part of it shows up in the actual cut that you would do in fencing and forms a part of the action that you would do in fencing. Then you train the other components as well. So, you know, you do things like you start with your full cut as that sort of cut through all the way, all right? And then you move to throwing the cut from an outside guard and cutting all the way through. With that, you know, starting arm position correct, just this wrist motion here, coming through, then bringing it in, right? And then you move on from there to the completed action of adding in the part where you start here, you cut all the way through, and then you bring it back on guard. So, that's the end state that we're looking for in general. There are, of course, specific variations that exist in sources. That's the general idea here, that we started with this, all right, to get to the point where we do this, wet, and do that in a way that would cut severely, would inflict significant damage, because that's the context of my cutting videos. Okay? Once you're reasonably good at getting all of the pieces of a cut in that big shoulder cut motion, that all that pieces refers to things I will be talking about in subsequent videos, right? It doesn't remain, that is, a significant part of your training. So I do a handful of repetitions of cutting the 6 cuts as shoulder cuts simply as part of my warm-up, and then move on to the training that's more significant, more at my skill level. Beginning students, we're going to have to spend more time doing that, and you wean your way off of that and into the more specific and applicable actions as you go along. I will also, as part of my warm-up, do, my wrist cuts, my infinity cuts here, all right? And again, that's part of the process of building your way up to being able to do the completed action as intended, like this. One other point that I do want to make clear is the idea that even when you are doing a wrist cut, you still need to be cutting through the target if you want to be achieving something significant with the hit. So what that means is that when I start here and I come through for this wrist cut, I cut all the way through the target, and then I bring my wrist around. Like that. And the specific thing that we're trying to avoid doing is turning too early in that motion. Right? So if I do this and I start turning here, and contact actually is made with my flat, right? Then what I have done is I created a situation where all I would do in a real fencing match, in a real fight, is slap my opponent with the flat. And that, of course, doesn't achieve our objective in that context of we're trying to inflict damage because we need to physically stop our opponent from being able to fight back against us. It doesn't even have a high likelihood of succeeding at an objective at a lower intensity sort of scenario, such as fighting to the first blood, or fighting to an injury, or simply trying to discourage someone from attacking you until things calm down. Right? You're not likely to achieve that with the hit with the flat. I'm not saying you can't, I'm not saying it's impossible, I'm just saying it's much less likely. And so it still isn't good technique. And so good technique is cutting all the way through even with that wrist cut, so that I would actually hit with the edge well aligned at the moment of impact and maintain that impact through the action instead of turning before that. I'll also note that you reduce the likelihood of damaging your sword by doing that. And so depending on where you prioritize that versus the sword as a tool, and if it gets damaged, that's a thing that happens. Turning through the target breaks swords. Cutting all the way through without turning makes it less likely you will break your sword doing cutting. Thank you.